The wind howled across the red mountains of Dorne like a wounded beast, carrying sand and old memories with it. Arthur Dayne stood outside the small stone tower, his silver cloak moving slowly behind him. Dorne, the legendary sword of House Dayne, rested at his side, its pale blade catching the early sunlight. To the world, Ser Arthur Dayne was supposed to be dead, fallen at the Tower of Joy, but the world believed many lies. Inside the tower, a baby cried. Arthur closed his eyes for a moment before walking back in. Every cry reminded him of promises broken, kings betrayed, and honor twisted into something ugly. The boy lay wrapped in rough cloth, dark hair already visible despite his young age. His eyes, when open, were grey, unmistakably stark. Jon Snow, though Arthur refused to call him that. "You are not a Snow," Arthur murmured quietly as he picked the child up, "and you will never belong to them." The child calmed almost instantly, gripping Arthur's finger with surprising strength. Arthur felt something tighten in his chest, not affection exactly, but responsibility, a burden placed on him by dying words. Lyanna Stark's final breath still echoed in his memory. Her voice had been weak, shaking, yet filled with desperate certainty. Protect him, but never let the Starks claim him. Arthur had not understood then. He barely understood now, but he had seen the fear in her eyes when she spoke of her family, not hatred, but mistrust. Something had gone wrong long before Robert's rebellion ended. The North praised honor, yet honor had led Eddard Stark to slaughter 3 Kingsguard knights who had only followed their vows. Arthur remembered the clash clearly, the betrayal hidden beneath noble words. Ned Stark had walked away a hero. Arthur Dayne had been buried as a villain. The boy would know the truth. Outside, distant thunder rolled though the sky remained clear. Arthur sat beside the small fire, feeding it carefully. Life in hiding had changed him. Once he had been the finest knight in Westeros, admired by nobles and feared by enemies. Now he hunted his own food, repaired his own armor, and raised a child meant to reshape the future. He looked down at the boy again. "You will grow strong," Arthur said softly, "stronger than their lies." Years passed like drifting sand. The boy grew fast. By 5 years old, he was already stubborn, curious, and fearless to a dangerous degree. Arthur trained him gently at first, balance, awareness, silence, not swordplay yet. Discipline came before steel. "What is my name?" the boy asked one evening as they watched the sunset blade red across the dunes. Arthur paused. Names had power, names shaped loyalty. "You are Jon," he finally said, "Jon Sand." The boy frowned. "Why Sand?" "Because the North abandoned you," Arthur replied calmly. "Dorne did not." Jon accepted the answer, but questions lingered behind his eyes. Arthur noticed everything, the way Jon listened when travelers spoke of Winterfell, the way his expression changed at stories of Honorable Lord Eddard Stark. Curiosity was dangerous, truth even more so. So Arthur began teaching history, his version of it. He told Jon about a prince who loved deeply and was called a monster, about knights who kept vows while others broke them for glory, about a rebellion built on lies and pride. He never shouted, never forced belief. He simply planted seeds. "The Starks speak of honor," Arthur said during one lesson, guiding Jon's wooden sword. "But honor without understanding becomes cruelty." Jon struck forward clumsily. Arthur deflected easily. "Did they hurt us?" Jon asked. Arthur hesitated, just long enough to make the answer feel heavy. "Yes." The boy's grip tightened. Children did not understand politics. They understood loyalty and betrayal. Arthur knew this. He shaped lessons carefully, turning memories into warnings. By 10, Jon trained with real steel. He moved differently from other boys Arthur had known, faster to adapt, slower to trust. He rarely laughed, but when he did, it felt rare and bright, like sunlight after storms. One night, after a brutal training session, Jon sat beside the fire nursing bruised hands. "Why must I be stronger than everyone else?" he asked. Arthur looked at the flames. Because one day, he said quietly, you will stand before people who believe they own your fate. Who? Arthur met his eyes. The Starks. The word hung between them like a drawn blade. Jon did not question it, not anymore. Far away in the cold north, Winterfell thrived under peaceful rule. Eddard Stark raised his children, believing the past was buried forever. The secret he carried slept quietly beneath years of silence. But secrets raised in exile do not die. They grow teeth. And in Dorne, beneath a sky burning gold, Arthur Dayne watched the boy who might one day destroy the family that never knew they had lost him. Jon swung his sword again, harder this time, anger gidding his movements. Arthur corrected his stance gently. Yes, he thought silently, learn to fight them. The wind carried the sound of steel across the desert, a promise waiting for its moment. The years moved forward quietly, almost peacefully, but peace in hiding was never real. Jon grew taller, leaner, and sharper with every passing season. By 12, his movements carried purpose. He woke before sunrise without being told, practiced footwork until his legs trembled, and cleaned his blade with the seriousness of a sworn knight. Arthur Dayne watched all of it carefully, never praising too easily. Praise created comfort, and comfort weakened warriors. The boy needed discipline more than kindness. Dorne hardened people differently than the North would have. The sun burned mistakes into memory. Water was precious, patience necessary. Jon learned survival before politics, how to track animals across sand, how to read the sky for storms, how silence could save a life faster than bravery. But questions still lived inside him. One evening, while sharpening practice swords outside their small home, Jon spoke without looking up. If the Starks wronged us, why didn't you kill them? Arthur froze for only a second, because he had asked himself that question 1,000 times. Vengeance without purpose is weakness, Arthur replied calmly. Knights do not kill for anger, they wait for justice. Jon nodded slowly, though disappointment flickered across his face. Like all young boys, he imagined enemies as monsters easily defeated. Arthur knew reality would wound him eventually. You fought them, Jon pressed. You said so. Yes. Who won? Arthur stared at the fading sunlight. Memory returned like an old scar reopening, steel clashing, dust rising, friends falling one by one. Gerald Hightower's final stand. Oswell went silence, and Eddard Stark, grim and determined, fighting not like a villain, but like a man convinced he was right. We both lost, Arthur said finally. Jon didn't understand, but he sensed the weight behind the words and let the matter drop. Training became harsher after that. Arthur introduced dual-blade exercises, forcing Jon to think faster. He taught him how larger opponents relied on strength and how patience could defeat rage. Jon failed often. He fell into the sand, cursed under his breath, and rose again without complaint. That stubbornness reminded Arthur painfully of Lyanna, fierce, unyielding, unwilling to accept limits. Sometimes Arthur wondered if he was shaping the boy correctly or simply molding him into a weapon born from regret. Travelers occasionally passed through nearby trade paths. Arthur avoided them, but information was necessary. From hidden conversations, Jon learned fragments of the world beyond Dorne. King Robert Baratheon ruled from the Iron Throne. The realm was at peace, though whispers of debt and excess followed the king's name. The Starks remained respected in the north. Eddard Stark was known as honorable, fair, beloved. Each time Jon heard praise for the Starks, confusion crept into his expression. They sound good, Jon admitted once. Arthur's jaw tightened slightly. He had expected this moment. Men are rarely only one thing, Arthur said carefully. A man can be honorable to some and cruel to others. Jon considered that deeply, so they are heroes to their people. Yes, and enemies to us. Arthur nodded. That night Jon trained longer than usual, striking the wooden post until his palms bled. Arthur did not stop him. At 14, Jon faced his first real fight. Bandits had followed Arthur unknowingly, hopping to rob a lone knight traveling with a boy. They attacked at dusk, 3 men, poorly armored but desperate. Arthur stepped forward calmly, Dorne still sheathed. "Stay behind me," he ordered. But Jon moved anyway. Fear flashed across Arthur's mind, not for himself, but for the boy. Jon's sword met steel for the first time. The clash shocked him. Real combat was louder, uglier, faster than training. One bandit lunged wildly. Jon barely parried, stumbling backward. Arthur could have ended the fight instantly. He didn't. Instead, he watched. Jon adjusted his stance just as taught. He waited, breathed, and struck when the man overreached. The blade cut shallow across the attacker's arm, enough to send him retreating in panic. Arthur finished the fight seconds later, disarming the remaining men without killing them. When silence returned, Jon stared at his shaking hands. "I could have died," he whispered. "Yes," Arthur said. Jon looked up, almost angry. "You let it happen." Arthur met his gaze evenly. "Now you understand truth. A sword is not glory, it is survival." Jon said nothing more, but something changed in him that day. Childhood faded, awareness replaced it. That night by the fire, Jon finally asked the question Arthur had known would come. "Who were my parents?" The flames crackled between them. Arthur had prepared many answers over the years, yet none felt sufficient. Lies built too early could shatter later. "Your mother was brave," Arthur said slowly. "She trusted the wrong people." "And my father?" Arthur hesitated longer. "A great man," he said at last, "destroyed by war and betrayal." Jon absorbed the words quietly. "Did the Starks kill them?" Arthur did not answer directly. "They helped create the world that took them from you." It was not a lie, not entirely. Jon's eyes hardened, not with rage yet, but with purpose forming like steel in a forge. "I want to see the North someday," he said. Arthur felt unease crawl through him. Destiny was beginning to move, whether he wished it or not. "One day," Arthur replied carefully, "but not as a lost boy." Jon tilted his head. "Then as what?" Arthur stood, placing Dorne into Jon's hands for the first time. The pale sword gleamed in firelight, almost alive. "As a man, they will fear." Jon held the blade reverently, unaware that far away, the Game of Thrones was slowly awakening again, and every lesson Arthur had taught was guiding him toward a collision neither mentor nor student could escape. The desert wind rose outside, carrying whispers of war yet to come. Jon barely slept that night after holding Dorne for the first time. The sword felt different from any weapon he had trained with, lighter, yet heavier in meaning. Even after Arthur took it back and placed it beside his bedroll, Jon could still feel its presence in his hands, as if the blade had judged him and decided he was not yet worthy. Morning came cold despite the Dornish sun. Arthur was already awake, sharpening steel with slow, careful movements. Jon noticed something unusual. Arthur looked tired, not physically, but weighed down by thought. "You hesitated yesterday," Arthur said, without looking up. Jon stiffened. "I fought." "You survived," Arthur corrected calmly. "Those are not the same thing." Jon frowned, but listened. A warrior who seeks victory dies young. A warrior who seeks understanding lives long enough to choose his battles. Jon sat across from him. "You keep teaching me to wait, but for what?" Arthur finally looked at him. The boy's face had changed over the years. The softness of childhood was gone. His grey eyes carried intensity, now stark eyes, whether Arthur liked it or not. "For the right moment," Arthur said. Jon shook his head slightly. "You speak as if my life already belongs to some future." Arthur did not deny it. "Because it did." Training intensified after that day. Arthur stopped holding back completely. He attacked faster, forcing Jon to rely on instinct rather than memorized movements. Bruises became common. Failure became expected. Jon learned to fight while exhausted, hungry, and angry, because real enemies never waited for fairness. Weeks later, they traveled farther north than usual, toward a small trading village hidden along a caravan route. Arthur needed supplies they could not gather alone. Jon walked beside him wearing a plain cloak, sword hidden but ready. It was Jon's first time among crowds. The noise overwhelmed him, merchants shouting, children laughing, arguments breaking out over prices. Life existed here in ways isolation had hidden from him. People spoke freely about kings and lords as if they were distant stories. Jon listened carefully. A group of travelers sat near a fountain discussing news from the north. Winterfell prepares for the king's visit, one man said, Robert Baratheon himself riding north. Jon slowed his steps. The Starks must be honored beyond measure, another replied. Lord Eddard is said to be the most honorable man alive. Jon felt something twist inside his chest. Honorable. The word echoed against everything Arthur had taught him. He glanced at Arthur, expecting anger, but Arthur remained calm, getting him away quietly. They bought supplies in silence until Jon finally spoke once they left the village behind. They respect him, Jon said. Yes, they trust him. Arthur nodded again. Jon stopped walking. Then why do you hate him? Arthur turned slowly. I do not hate Eddard Stark. Jon blinked, confused. I mistrust the world that made him a hero, Arthur continued. History is written by survivors, not always by the truthful. Jon struggled with that answer. The stories he heard and the lessons he learned refused to fit together neatly. Maybe both things are true, Jon said carefully. Maybe he is honorable and still wrong. Arthur studied him closely, surprised. For the first time, Jon was not simply accepting what he had been taught. He was thinking beyond it. Arthur felt pride and fear. That night, as they camped beneath open stars, Arthur realized time was running out. The boy was becoming a man. Soon questions would demand real answers, not guided ones. Jon, Arthur said quietly. Yes. If you learned something about your past that changed everything, would you still follow your own judgment? Jon considered before answering. Truth should not control us. What we choose after knowing it does. Arthur looked into the fire, unsettled by the maturity in the response. Perhaps he had trained Jon too well. Days later, danger returned, not bandits this time, but knights. 3 riders approached their camp wearing colors Arthur recognized instantly. Storm-gray cloaks bearing the crowned stag of House Baratheon. Royal Patrol. Arthur's hand moved subtly toward Dorne. Jon noticed, are they enemies? Not yet, Arthur murmured. The riders dismounted politely, asking routine questions about travelers and fugitives from recent raids. Their leader studied Jon briefly. Boy fights, the knight asked casually. Jon answered before Arthur could stop him. Yes. The knight laughed. The king seeks strong young men for service someday, plenty of glory in King Robert's court. Jon said nothing, but curiosity flashed in his eyes again. After they left, Arthur packed camp immediately. We move tonight, he said. Jon followed, confused. They were friendly. Arthur's voice hardened slightly. Friendly men serve dangerous masters. As they traveled through darkness, Jon sensed unease radiating from his mentor. Something larger was shifting beyond their hidden life. What are you afraid of? Jon finally asked. Arthur stopped walking. I am afraid, he said quietly, that the world will discover you before you understand who you truly are. Jon absorbed that silently. Above them, stars stretched endlessly, the same stars shining over Winterfell, over King's Landing, over a kingdom slowly moving toward chaos again. And somewhere deep inside Jon, 2 identities were beginning to form, the boy shaped by Arthur Dayne's truths and the unknown child tied to a family he had never met. Soon, those identities would collide. Arthur knew it. and he feared which one would survive. The journey north began without Jon realizing it at first. Arthur never announced their destination. He simply changed their path little by little, getting them away from the deep deserts of Dorne toward greener lands. The air cooled as weeks passed, and the dry wind softened into something unfamiliar. Jon noticed grass replacing sand, rivers replacing dust, and villages growing larger. It felt like walking into another world. "Why are we leaving?" Jon finally asked one morning as they crossed a shallow stream. Arthur adjusted the saddle straps calmly, because hiding forever turns strength into waste. Jon frowned, "So we are not hiding anymore." Arthur looked at him carefully. "We are preparing." That answer stayed with Jon, preparation for what he did not know, but excitement mixed with unease inside him. For years, his world had been small, training, survival, lessons about betrayal and honor. Now the world itself was opening. And with it came stories. At inns and roadside camps, Jon heard more news. The king's visit to Winterfell had already happened. Rumors spread fast. The hand of the king had died. Eddard Stark had ridden south to serve King Robert. And the royal court stirred with politics and whispers. Jon listened every time the Starks were mentioned. Each story added confusion instead of clarity. Some praised Eddard Stark's honesty. Others called him naive. Some admired his loyalty. Others said loyalty was weakness in King's Landing. Jon began asking fewer questions aloud, choosing instead to think quietly. Arthur noticed. One evening, after a long ride, they camped beside an old ruin swallowed by vines. Rain fell softly, tapping against stone. Jon sat watching droplets slide down his blade. "Do you think a man can be both good and dangerous?" Jon asked suddenly. Arthur answered without hesitation. "The most dangerous men often believe they are good." Jon nodded slowly, though he seemed unsatisfied. Arthur understood why. The boy was trying to reconcile two versions of the same world, the one he had been taught and the one he was now witnessing. And Arthur knew the truth he feared most. Jon was beginning to form his own judgment. Training changed again during the journey. Arthur introduced strategy instead of pure combat. He made Jon study terrain, predict enemy movements, and think like a commander rather than a fighter. "Strength wins battles," Arthur explained while drawing lines in dirt with a stick. "Understanding wins wars." Jon studied the markings carefully. "You trained princes like this?" Arthur paused. "Yes." Jon looked up. "Was my father one of them?" The question struck harder than any blade. Arthur stared at the rain, memories flooding back, silver hair, confident laughter, a prince who believed love mattered more than crowns. "Yes," Arthur said quietly. "He learned quickly." Jon seemed proud, without fully knowing why. Days later, they reached the borders of the Reach, where fertile lands stretched endlessly. Castles dotted the horizon like silent watchers. Jon felt small seeing such power for the first time. "So many lords," he muttered. "So many ambitions," Arthur corrected. That night, trouble found them again. Not soldiers this time, but knights in bright armor bearing the rose of House Tyrell. A tournament caravan had stopped nearby, and drunken squires wandered too close to their camp. One noticed Jon practicing sword forms and mocked him loudly. "Look at this one," the squire laughed, "swinging steel like he's a lordling." Jon ignored him at first. The insults continued. Something inside Jon snapped, not rage, but pride wounded by years of being told he had been abandoned. He accepted the challenge. Arthur watched silently as wooden practice swords were chosen. A circle formed quickly, laughter filling the air. The squire attacked aggressively, expecting easy victory. Jon moved differently. Calm, patient. Arthur's teachings guided every step. Jon waited for overconfidence, then disarmed the squire with a precise strike that sent the weapon flying into mud. Silence followed. The watching knights exchanged surprised looks. Well fought, one admitted. Jon felt a strange warmth recognition, respect earned, not given. But Arthur ended the moment quickly, pulling Jon away before questions could begin. As they walked into darkness, Jon spoke breathlessly. "Did you see? I beat him easily." Arthur's voice remained stern. Victory draws attention. Attention invites danger. Jon's excitement faded slightly. "You never let me enjoy anything." Arthur stopped walking. "You think I deny you joy?" he asked quietly. Jon hesitated, but nodded. Arthur's expression softened, rare and brief. "Every skill you gain brings you closer to a destiny others may try to control. I teach caution so you may choose your own path when that day comes." Jon absorbed that silently. Later, as Jon slept, Arthur remained awake staring into dying firelight. The resemblance was becoming undeniable, not just to Lyanna, but to Rhaegar as well. The same thoughtful silence, the same pull toward purpose. The realm would not survive peacefully once Jon entered it fully. Arthur realized something painful then. He could not protect Jon forever. Soon the boy would need truth, the full truth, or risk becoming exactly what Arthur feared, a weapon guided by half-understood hatred. Morning arrived with cold mist rolling across the fields. Arthur woke Jon early. "We ride north today," he said. Jon blinked awake. "North." Arthur met his eyes. "Yes, toward the land that shaped your enemies and your blood." Jon's heart pounded, though he didn't know why. For the first time, Winterfell was no longer just a story. It was a destination. And neither of them understood how deeply that journey would change everything they believed. The air grew colder with every mile. Jon noticed it first in the mornings, frost clinging to grass, breath turning visible, the wind carrying a sharp bite that felt completely different from dawn's dry heat. The land itself seemed quieter, heavier, as if watching strangers carefully. They had entered the north. Jon felt it without needing to be told. Something inside him stirred strangely, a feeling both familiar and uncomfortable. The forests were thicker here, ancient trees stretching toward grey skis. Rivers ran dark and slow. Even the people they passed looked harder, quieter, shaped by survival rather than comfort. Arthur rode slightly ahead, silent more often now. "You've been here before," Jon said one afternoon. Arthur nodded. "Long ago." Jon studied his mentor's face. The calm confidence Arthur always carried now seemed mixed with caution. Every distant rider was watched carefully, every village avoided unless necessary. "Are we close to Winterfell?" Jon asked. Arthur's grip tightened on the reins. "Closer than I would like." They stopped at a hill overlooking a wide valley as evening fell. Smoke rose in the distance from scattered settlements, and far beyond, barely visible against the horizon, stood the faint outline of massive walls. Jon felt his chest tighten. "That's it, isn't it?" Arthur followed his gaze. Winterfell. Even from miles away, it carried weight, ancient, immovable, proud. The castle looked less like a home and more like a promise carved into stone. "Yes," Arthur said quietly. Jon expected anger to rise inside him. For years, he had imagined this place as the home of enemies, the seat of betrayal. Yet what he felt instead was something far more confusing. Recognition. He shook the feeling away quickly. "They look peaceful," Jon muttered. Arthur's voice turned firm. "Appearances protect power." They made camp deep within the forest rather than approaching the castle. Arthur avoided roads now, choosing hidden paths only experienced warriors would notice. That night, Jon could not sleep. The north felt alive around him, wolves howling in the distance, branches creaking in cold wind. Every sound felt strangely comforting. Without understanding why, Jon stepped away from camp and walked through the trees. Snowflakes began to fall lightly. Jon reached a clearing and stopped suddenly. A direwolf stood there. Large, grey, and silent, it watched him without fear. Its eyes reflected pale light, intelligent and calm. Jon's hand moved slowly toward his sword, but something told him not to draw it. The wolf did not attack. Instead, it stepped closer. Jon's heartbeat slowed. He felt an unexplainable connection, as if the animal recognized him. The wolf sniffed the air, then gave a low sound, not a growl, not quite a greeting, before turning and disappearing into the forest. Jon stood frozen long after it vanished. "Ghosts of the North," Arthur said from behind him. Jon turned, startled. "It didn't fear me." Arthur watched the dark trees carefully. Direwolves once followed the kings of winter. They are drawn to blood and destiny. Jon frowned. "You speak as if this place belongs to me." Arthur said nothing. Back at camp, silence stretched between them until Jon finally spoke. "You've told me the Starks betrayed us," Jon said slowly, "but why bring me here? Why now?" Arthur stared into the fire for a long time before answering. "Because hatred built on distance becomes fantasy," he said. "You must see the truth of your enemies with your own eyes." Jon considered that deeply. The next day they traveled closer, not into Winterfell itself, but near enough to observe travelers entering and leaving. Jon watched families laughing, guards greeting villagers by name, children playing near the outer roads. This did not look like the home of monsters. Confusion grew stronger. A young boy rode past laughing with his brothers, escorted by Stark guards. The banner of the direwolf flew proudly above them. Jon felt something twist painfully inside his chest. "They look happy," he admitted quietly. Arthur's voice softened. "Even good men can unknowingly cause suffering." Jon nodded, but doubt had begun to take root. That evening, as they prepared to leave the area, riders suddenly appeared along the road, Stark soldiers patrolling. One rider lagged behind the others, adjusting his horse. Jon's eyes widened. The man looked familiar despite never meeting him. Dark hair touched with grey, solemn face, calm authority. Eddard Stark. Jon felt an overwhelming pull. Curiosity, anger, longing, emotions crashing together so violently he could barely breathe. Arthur saw him too. For the first time since Jon had known him, Arthur Dayne looked shaken. "Do not move," Arthur whispered sharply. But Jon couldn't look away. The man laughed softly at something a guard said, completely unaware that the boy he had carried from the Tower of Joy stood only yards away, hidden among trees. Jon expected to feel hatred. Instead, he felt loss. A life he never lived flashed through his imagination, growing up inside those walls, training beside Stark children, belonging somewhere. The thought angered him instantly. "They stole that from me," Jon whispered. Arthur watched him carefully, hearing both pain and resentment forming together. "Yes," Arthur said quietly, "they did." Eddard Stark rode on, disappearing down the road, never knowing how close truth had come to him. Jon stood motionless long after. Something inside him had changed forever. Hatred was no longer simple. It now carried questions, and questions were far more dangerous. As night fell, Arthur made a decision he had delayed for years. "It is time," he said. Jon looked up. "Time for what?" Arthur met his eyes, solemn and certain. "For you to learn who you truly are." The fire crackled between them as the past, buried for 14 years, finally prepared to rise. The fire burned low, its orange glow flickering across Arthur Dayne's face. Jon sat opposite him, waiting, every muscle tense. The words Arthur had spoken, "Who you truly are," echoed louder than the wind moving through the trees. For years Jon had imagined this moment. He expected anger, maybe pride, maybe confirmation that the Starks were monsters beyond redemption. He was not prepared for hesitation. Arthur Dayne, the man who never hesitated in battle, struggled now. "You must listen fully," Arthur said at last, "and you must not interrupt, no matter what you feel." Jon nodded slowly. Arthur drew a long breath, eyes fixed on the flames as if searching through time itself. Your mother was Lyanna Stark. The world seemed to stop. Jon blinked. The name struck him like a physical blow. A Stark, he whispered. Yes. Confusion exploded inside him. That makes no sense, you said. I said the Starks wronged you, Arthur replied firmly. That remains true. Jon's thoughts raced. Lyanna Stark, sister of Eddard Stark, the same family he had been taught to distrust. Then my father, Jon asked, voice unsteady. Arthur's gaze softened with something close to grief. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. Silence swallowed the forest. Jon stared at him, unable to breathe for several seconds. The stories he had heard his entire life clashed violently, the mad dragon prince blamed for war, the honorable Starks who rose against tyranny. I am a dragon, Jon asked faintly. You are both, Arthur said, ice and fire. Jon stood abruptly, packing away from the fire. Snow crunched beneath his boots as anger, shock, and disbelief tangled together. You lied to me, he said. Arthur did not deny it. I protected you. All my life. Yes. Jon turned sharply. Why would my own mother hide me from her family? Arthur's expression hardened slightly. Because war twists truth. Your parents' love was used as justification for rebellion. Robert Baratheon wanted revenge. The realm needed a villain. Your father became that villain. And the Starks, Jon demanded. Arthur hesitated, not from uncertainty, but from choosing words carefully. Eddard Stark found you after the battle, he said. He promised Lyanna he would protect you. Jon froze. Protect. The word struck deeper than any accusation. He protected me, Jon asked quietly. Yes, by claiming you as his bastard son. Jon's mind reeled. Every lesson Arthur had given him suddenly shifted meaning. The Starks had not abandoned him entirely, they had hidden him. Then why had Arthur raised him to mistrust them? Arthur seemed to sense the question forming. I feared what would happen if you grew under Stark influence, he said. You would forget your father, forget the truth of how the realm betrayed him. Jon's voice rose. So you made me hate half my own blood. Arthur stood slowly. I taught you caution, not hatred. Jon laughed bitterly. You told me they stole my life. Arthur met his gaze steadily. They did. You were born a prince, heir to a legacy erased by war. Jon's anger faltered. The idea felt unreal. Prince. He remembered Eddard Stark's face earlier that day, calm, kind, unaware, not the face of a thief or murderer. You said my father was good, Jon said quietly. He was. But everyone else says he caused the war. Arthur's eyes darkened. History favors victors. Jon turned away again, gripping his head. His identity fractured into pieces. Jon Sand, the abandoned boy, Stark blood calling to him, Targaryen destiny burning beneath it. Why tell me now? He asked. Because you saw him, Arthur answered. You saw Eddard Stark with your own eyes. If I waited longer, someone else might reveal the truth first, and you would never forgive me. Jon said nothing. Snow fell heavier now, covering the ground in silence. After a long time, Jon spoke again, voice calmer but colder. So what am I supposed to do with this? Arthur stepped closer. That choice is yours. Revenge, justice, peace, claiming your birthright, walking away from it all. I trained you so no one could force that decision upon you. Jon looked into the fire. For years, his purpose had been simple: grow strong, confront the Starks, reclaim dignity stolen from him. Now everything felt uncertain. If Eddard Stark protected me, Jon said slowly, then he is not my enemy. Arthur did not argue. But he still helped destroy my father's world, Jon added. Arthur nodded once. Both truths existed together, uncomfortable and unavoidable. Jon sank down beside the fire again, exhausted not from battle, but from understanding. "Who else knows?" he asked. "Very few, and those who knew are mostly dead." Jon gave a hollow laugh. "So I am a secret no one wants." Arthur's voice softened. "You are a danger the realm fears." They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Jon asked the question Arthur had dreaded most. "What would you have me become?" Arthur answered honestly, "Better than all of us." Jon stared into the flames, watching sparks rise into darkness like dying stars. For the first time in his life, hatred no longer guided him clearly. In its place stood something far more complicated: choice. And choice was heavier than any sword. Somewhere beyond the forest, Winterfell slept peacefully, unaware that the boy raised to resent it now knew he belonged to it as much as anyone inside its walls. Jon Snow, or something more, felt the weight of two legacies pulling him in opposite directions. Ice and fire. The war inside him had only just begun. Morning came grey and silent, the kind of northern morning that felt heavy before the sun even rose. Jon had not slept. He sat awake beside dying embers, replaying Arthur's words again and again until they lost meaning and then returned sharper each time. Lyanna Stark, Rhaegar Targaryen. Two names that should never have belonged to the same person, yet they were his parents. Arthur emerged from the trees carrying water, studying Jon carefully. The boy looked older overnight, as if truth itself had carved years into his face. "You are angry," Arthur said quietly. Jon shook his head. "I don't know what I am." That frightened him more than anger ever could. For years, every action had direction: train harder, grow stronger, one day confront the Starks. Now the path ahead split into countless possibilities, none clear. "If the realm knew," Jon said slowly, "they would kill me." "Yes," Arthur answered without hesitation. "Robert Baratheon would see you as a threat." Jon absorbed that calmly. It felt strange learning that his existence alone could start a war. "And the Starks?" Jon asked. Arthur hesitated slightly. "Eddard Stark might protect you again, or he might see you as a danger to his own children. Even honorable men must choose family first." Jon remembered the Stark children riding past, laughing, safe, loved. "They lived the life meant for me." The thought returned, sharper now. Not hatred, not yet, but resentment began creeping back into his heart, reshaped by truth instead of lies. "What happens now?" Jon asked. Arthur looked northward, toward Winterfell's distant walls. "Now you decide whether you remain a hidden boy, or become someone the world must reckon with." Jon stood slowly, snow crunching beneath his boots. He felt heavier, but also clearer. The confusion was settling into something stronger, a purpose forming from chaos. "I want to see him," Jon said. Arthur's eyes narrowed slightly. "Eddard Stark." "Yes, that is dangerous." "I know." Arthur studied him for a long moment, searching for hesitation. There was none. Jon's expression carried calm determination, frighteningly similar to both of his parents. "Why?" Arthur asked. Jon answered honestly, "Because I need to know whether the man who raised my ghost is my enemy or my protector." Arthur exhaled slowly. This moment had always been inevitable. "Then we do this carefully," he said. They spent the day preparing. Jon changed into simpler northern clothing, hiding signs of southern travel. Arthur reviewed plans repeatedly: routes into Winter Town, escape paths, signals if danger appeared. But preparation could not calm the storm building inside Jon. As dusk fell, they moved toward Winterfell under cover of gathering darkness. Smoke curled from chimneys, and warm light glowed behind stone walls. The smell of food drifted through cold air, awakening memories Jon didn't realize he possessed. It felt like coming home, to a place he had never lived. Wintertown bustled quietly. Farmers, soldiers, and servants moved through streets unaware of who walked among them. Jon kept his hood low, observing everything, laughter, arguments, ordinary life untouched by secrets. "They trust this place," he murmured. Arthur replied softly, "That is why it is powerful." They stopped near the outer courtyard, where Stark guards rotated shifts. Jon watched them closely. Their discipline reminded him of Arthur's teachings, loyalty without arrogance. Eventually, a familiar figure appeared walking along the battlements. Eddard Stark. Closer now, Jon could see details clearly. Tired eyes, steady posture, the weight of responsibility visible in every movement. This was not a conqueror or a tyrant. Just a man. Jon's chest tightened painfully. "That's him," he whispered. Arthur nodded once. "We leave if anything feels wrong." Jon stepped forward before doubt could stop him. A guard noticed first. "You there, state your business." Jon lowered his hood slowly. "I need to speak with Lord Stark," he said. The guard frowned. "And who are you?" Jon hesitated. For years he had known exactly what to say. Now every name felt incomplete. Finally he answered, voice steady. "A truth he once carried." The guard looked confused, but sent word inside. Minutes stretched endlessly. Jon felt his heartbeat thunder louder with every passing second. Arthur remained hidden nearby, watchful and ready. Then the gate opened. Eddard Stark stepped forward, studying the stranger before him. Their eyes met. Grey eyes mirrored grey eyes. Recognition did not come immediately, only curiosity, then confusion. Something about the young man before him felt familiar in a way Ned Stark could not explain. "Yes," Ned asked gently, "what truth do you bring?" Jon swallowed. All his anger, questions, and longing gathered into one moment. "My mother's name," Jon said quietly, "was Lyanna Stark." Ned froze. The world seemed to stop breathing. Shock spread slowly across his face, followed by disbelief, and then fear. Jon watched every emotion carefully. "Who are you?" Ned whispered. Jon answered, voice calm but heavy with everything he had become. "The son you hid from the world." Silence shattered the night. Behind them, the ancient walls of Winterfell stood witness as past and present finally collided, and Jon realized there was no turning back anymore. Ned Stark did not move for several seconds. The courtyard felt impossibly quiet, as if even the wind refused to interfere. Guards shifted uneasily, sensing tension they did not understand. Jon stood still, forcing himself not to look away from the man who had unknowingly shaped his entire life. Eddard Stark's voice finally returned, low and strained. "Leave us," he told the guards. They hesitated only briefly before obeying. The gates closed, footsteps fading until only two men remained facing one another beneath torchlight. Ned stepped closer, studying Jon's face carefully, the grey eyes, dark hair, the unmistakable echo of someone long buried in memory. "Lyanna," Ned whispered. Jon felt something tighten in his chest, hearing his mother's name spoken with such grief. "You knew," Jon said quietly. "It wasn't a question." Ned nodded slowly, pain visible in every movement. "I gave my sister my word." Jon's jaw clenched, a word that erased me. Ned flinched slightly at that. "I saved your life," he replied gently. Jon's emotions surged, by pretending I was nothing. The words came harsher than intended, years of confusion pushing them forward. Ned accepted them without anger. "Yes," he said simply, "because Robert Baratheon would have murdered you the moment he learned who you were." Jon paused. Arthur had told him the same, yet hearing it from Ned felt different. There was no manipulation in his tone, only regret. "You never intended to abandon me," Jon realized slowly. "Never," Ned said. His voice broke slightly. "Every day I feared the truth would escape. Every day I prayed you would grow safely, even if you hated me for it someday." Jon's anger faltered again. All his life he had imagined this man as either villain or thief. Instead, he found someone burdened by sacrifice. "Why didn't you come for me?" Jon asked quietly. Ned looked confused. "Come for you." Jon hesitated, then understood. Arthur had taken him before Ned ever could. The realization hit hard. History had not unfolded the way he believed. No single betrayal existed, only choices made in chaos. "You thought I was dead," Jon murmured. Ned's face paled. "After the tower, yes." Silence followed, heavy with lost years. Jon suddenly felt exhausted, not from travel or training, but from carrying hatred that no longer fit the truth before him. "I was raised to believe the Starks stole my life," Jon admitted. Ned closed his eyes briefly. "And now?" Jon looked around Winterfell's courtyard, the home he might have known, the family he never met, the childhood shaped by secrecy instead of warmth. "Now I think everyone lost something," he said. Footsteps approached quietly from the shadows. Arthur Dayne emerged, no longer hiding. Ned's hand instinctively moved toward his sword before recognition struck. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Ser Arthur." "The same," Arthur said calmly. For a moment, neither man spoke, memories of the Tower of Joy hanging between them like ghosts. "You lived," Ned said softly. "As did you." There was no anger in Arthur's voice now, only weariness. Ned looked between them, understanding forming rapidly. "You raised him." "Yes." "Why?" Arthur answered honestly. "Because I believed the realm would destroy everything Rhaegar stood for. I wanted the boy strong enough to choose his own path." Ned studied Jon carefully. "And what path is that?" Jon felt both men watching him, the knight who had shaped his strength, and the lord who had protected his life from afar. For the first time, no one told him who to be. The choice truly belonged to him. He stepped forward, voice steady. "I am not here for revenge." Arthur's shoulders relaxed slightly. "I am not here to claim a throne either," Jon continued. "Not yet." Ned exhaled quietly, relief mixed with uncertainty. "I came because I needed truth," Jon said, "and now I have it." He turned toward Arthur. "You taught me strength." Then toward Ned. "You gave me life." Both lessons mattered. Jon looked up at the direwolf banner waving above Winterfell, then toward the distant south he had crossed. "I am not only Stark," he said, "and not only Targaryen." Snow began falling again, soft and endless. "I am what survives when war ends." Neither man argued. Ned finally spoke. "What will you do now?" Jon smiled faintly, the first genuine smile since learning the truth. "I will learn who I am without lies guiding me." Arthur nodded approvingly. Ned looked proud despite uncertainty. The future remained dangerous. Kings still ruled, secrets still threatened kingdoms, but Jon no longer walked as a weapon forged by resentment. He walked as something new. Not the boy taught to hate the Starks. Not the hidden prince waiting for revenge. But a man carrying both ice and fire, choosing his own destiny. As the three stood together beneath falling snow, the past finally loosened its grip. Somewhere far away, wars still waited to be born, thrones would still be contested, betrayals would still shape history. But this time, Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, would face that world not guided by hatred, but by understanding hardened through truth. And that alone changed everything. The wind moved through Winterfell's ancient stones, carrying away echoes of old promises and broken wars, leaving behind only possibility. The Game of Thrones had not ended, but its future had quietly, irrevocably changed.